It says I'm live, and I'm not double broadcasting, am I? All right, I'm ready to go. Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone, from Dunrovin Ranch in Lola, Montana. It's a lovely summer afternoon, and I wanted to play a couple of videos for you with some digital zoom so we can take a closer look at those chicks that are up there growing as we speak. I can't get over the number of fish and the number of big fish that Swoop is able to bring to our nest. I'm just so thrilled with that guy, except for the black plastic that he drapes across the nest. If you're looking at the nest, you should be seeing my screen with Swoop sitting on the perch overlooking the chicks, and you'll see that big sheet of plastic right beneath the perch. One of the chicks, Snap, got caught in it earlier today, and he did get himself uncaught, which is very good. But as soon as the scientists come and James goes up to fix our equipment, James will take that down. I don't know what to do about Swoop and his terrible home decorating ideas. He's a nuisance. Okay, so I'm going to show you this video. I've got several videos kind of queued up here about some things that have been happening that I'd like to share with everybody. But this one is about a big fish that was delivered yesterday morning. And the thing I like about this video is, as you will see, the morning light comes and just shines right on the nest. So you're going to get a really good view of the chicks. And you can see that their feathers are developing as we speak. I think one of the things I miss most about not having a zoom feature is watching those feathers grow. I did send Mayberry some pictures from previous years of the feather growth. You can actually see the little shafts of individual feathers as they form on the backs of the chicks. And the other thing I think that you will note is that Snap, Crackle, and Pop are getting more and more difficult to tell apart. You can still see that Pop is a little bit smaller, but he's catching right up. And I'm really happy to say that all this fish has really reduced the bonking on Snap's part. He still menaces the other two, but he doesn't bonk them. They'll duck when he gets into the posture as though he's going to bonk and let him go first, but there's almost always enough fish for everybody. It's just been a beautiful summer this summer for our ospreys. So I'm going to go ahead and start this video. And you can see Harriet jumping off of the perch. She sees Swoop coming and he's bringing a fish. And it's a nice big live fish. He hasn't even taken his section first. So they're all ready to chow down. And in a second here, I'll switch to digital zoom and we'll look at it in fast time because the whole feeding takes about a half an hour. And I've reduced it to about, I don't know, 8 minutes, I think. But look at the size of those chicks. They're just huge. And I think if you look at them lined up there, Snap is on the far right and Pop is on the far left. He's getting fed and Snap's not going to like that. He's going to barge in there. He's barging in now. And you'll see him kind of get up high as though he's going to bonk the other two, and the other two will just take cover. See how he raises his head and looks at his siblings, and they kind of step back and let him have the first go at it. Everybody's happy. There, the chicks lowered their heads and let Snap go. But you can see those feathers are just coming into their own. And throughout this summer, the chicks' feathers will have little white tips to the ends of all the chicks. And that's the primary way to tell a juvenile osprey is the white on the tips of their feathers, which the adults don't have. But here the morning light is just shining so nicely on them. What a thrill to see these 3 chicks thriving so. This was just yesterday morning. I had hoped that the scientists would come out this Friday to ban the chicks, but that's not going to happen for another week. So we're about 10 days out from their being banned. There's a short window to be able to ban the chicks between the time that they're big enough to be handled, but not so big that they can fly. So we have to time it right within that window. And the scientists were a little concerned that they wouldn't be quite big enough at the beginning this Friday. So they wanted to delay it by a week. In part because we'd like to use the time that the chicks are out of the nest to recover some of our equipment, get a microphone up there so we can start hearing them, and replace the camera with a camera that will have a zoom and pan tilt capacities. So hopefully that will happen, probably not this weekend, but the following weekend. And you can see that Pop is on the left there, kind of giving up his space to the other 2, but worry not, he gets back in there and he gets his share. You can see that his crop is starting to fill a little bit. I think he even has a little blood from the fish on it. All of these chicks have just been doing so well. In a situation like this, the size of the fish really counts, because if the older ones are demanding to be fed first, it's because there's fish left over after they're satisfied that Pop is able to be fully fed. He's not just getting scraps, he'll get his full share. You can still see the tail of the fish. That's a big fish. I really don't have any idea where Swoop is getting these fish, but he sure is. I want to thank James for helping me get on today. For some reason, my computer gave us a hard time and he had to figure out a few things to get me going. It was all my computer. Oh, that's a good question, Mayberry. The time it takes for the osprey to migrate south, it can take anywhere from just a few days to 10 days or 2 weeks. It sort of depends on how straight the birds fly and with how much urgency. They've had radio colored ospreys that have made the trip, in 2 days between Montana and the Gulf of Mexico. Others take a more circuitous route. Very individualized. The thing that I think is so amazing is that the young chicks will know to go and where to go. How do they know that? No one teaches them. They don't follow their parents. They migrate independently. And as you will see, as the summer goes on, they don't even learn how to catch their fish before they take off. The father will feed them and he'll stay until the last chick has migrated on its own, and then he'll leave. Harriet is generally the first one to leave. She leaves all the rest of the parenting to Swoop. And again, as you will see, by that time, they are able to tear the fish apart themselves. So Swoop will just come and drop a fish at the nest and then get out of there, because there no doubt will be fights. These 3 chicks will compete for each fish that comes to the nest. Okay, so you can see that Snap has had his fill and he's moving away from the feeding trough. And Pop is still closest to us here now, closest to the front of the screen, but he'll get over there and get his turn. Look at the pin feather that's sticking out of Pop's back. They're losing these pin feathers and getting their real feathers, and it's a kind of an itchy time for them. You'll see them grooming and pulling those pin feathers. So there goes Crackles, had his fill. He's slowing down. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that is Pop who's up there in front now. He does look a little smaller. There we go. Now, Snap has gotten back in the game after a little rest. Remember, this is 4 times the natural speed. So she doesn't go that fast, that's for sure. But you can see Snap is pretty full. He or she is not fighting for every bite. Here comes Pop. Now Pop will be the only one left. Look at all the pin feathers coming out of the backs of those birds. It's going to be snowing pin feathers up on that nest soon. So now Pop's the only one being fed. Everybody else is satisfied and Pop's getting his share, his or her share. Snaps at it again. Okay, here's my second video, and I don't really remember who told me about this red-tailed hawk that has been frequenting our suet feeder, whether it was I Love or Celia, but somebody alerted me to it, so I went back and got some recordings. This is really unusual to have a red-tailed hawk focused on the suet feeder. We don't normally get hawks eating actually from the suet feeder, and you'll see that the magpies are not happy. They keep dive bombing them. The magpies are really very fierce birds and will harass hawks that show up. But normally hawks show up to hunt the other little birds that come to the bird feeders or the ground squirrels underneath. But this red-tailed hawk, I'm calling it a lazy hawk because it's trying to get kind of a free snack out of the suet cage, but the suet cage is too small to hold its full weight, and it's hard for the hawk to get it out of the cage. Seems determined though. I'm wondering if these, you'll see in a minute that a second hawk shows up, a second red-tailed hawk. I'm wondering if these are the chicks that hatched at Luke's and Ruby's nest in 2021. We had Luke, the leucitic hawk, and Ruby set up a nest very near here. And James's wife, Kate, got some really cute photos of the chicks. There were 2 chicks that hatched and fledged from that nest, and they hung around for a while, and I'm wondering if they're back. These birds have adult plumage, but that doesn't mean they're old. They could be 2-year-old hawks. And the thing that interests me is that they're more interested in the suet than in trying to catch the Columbia ground squirrel, which are numerous underneath the nest. Now you can see the hawks just sitting there. Now, normally what a hawk would do at the bird feeders is come and hide in a tree and wait for a squirrel or another bird like a pigeon. Look at the dive bomb from that magpie. They're fierce. So at first I thought there was only one hawk that was doing this, but you'll see in a minute that a second hawk shows up. The hawk is really having a hard time trying to get anything out of the cage, even though he knows the food is there. Now look at the lower part of your screen. You'll see he's sitting there on an arm of the pole that holds the web camera. He's sitting on a nightlight, one of our infrared night lights. What a beautiful bird. What a thrill, what a privilege to have these birds coming around where we can see them. Here it comes again, determined to take some food from that cage. You'll notice that we don't use cakes of suet that you get at feed stores. My husband goes to a butcher shop in downtown Missoula and gets the scraps from their butcher operation, and they very happily give us the scraps. We provide them with lots of photos of the birds that use their scraps, but I think it's actually more attractive in many ways. It has a lot of fat and a lot of suet, a lot of sinewy material. It's very smelly, so it brings in the birds for sure. Plus, it's free. Thanks to these wonderful people at the Orange Street Food Farm, which is a great supermarket right downtown Missoula. They've been doing this for us for about 6 years. Really wonderful people. But now look at this guy. He's really trying hard to get the suet out of there, but it's just not cooperating. He's too heavy. A woodpecker could just land right on the cage and just peck at the suet, but this guy is too big. He's sure not giving up, though. You can't help but love the beauty of that bird. You can see all his leg feathers that cover his legs. What a gorgeous bird. Okay, here comes the second hawk. You can see the second hawk tried to take it from the first hawk. So now we have 2 red-tailed hawks trying to eat from this bird cage, from the suet cage. This is one of the reasons I think it might be these chicks. They're really being opportunistic rather than hunting, and yet these are very good hunting grounds for ground squirrels for sure. We have an overabundance of Columbia ground squirrels, and I wish they would capture a few of them. They're sure spending a lot of energy trying to eat from that suet cage. We will soon have sound back at this web camera as well in the next couple of weeks. The equipment is starting to arrive to upgrade our broadcast system and get it back to where it was before the lightning struck. James has been working really hard on getting everything in order, and we've had to deal with the insurance company, and James has just done an outstanding job of identifying all the equipment and what it costs and where to get it. And I mean, it's just been a real burden for him, for sure. We all have to say thanks to James. I don't think this is a breeding pair, in part because the females are generally larger than the males, and these two look about the same size. I just can't help but think that these are the chicks that have come back to their natal area and are trying to set up housekeeping here around where they hatched. Red-tailed hawks are generally faithful to the area, but not to a specific nest, unlike ospreys come back to the same nest repeatedly. Generally, red-tailed hawks come back to the same area, but not necessarily to the same nest. And last year we did see Ruby and Luke again in the area, but they didn't occupy the same nest. And I don't know if they had chicks or not, because I didn't know where the nest was. You can see that this guy is getting some of that suet that's hanging out. This is a lot of work for a few bites of suet. I searched on the internet for occurrences of hawks at suet cages at bird feeders, and this is really quite rare that a hawk like this would fixate on the suet feeder. It's worthy of note. What a magnificent bird, huh? So this was just a couple days ago in the middle of the afternoon. There it goes. Okay, now this next little video, somebody mentioned a raccoon family at the bench bird feeder in the middle of the night. So this is on not last night, but the night before at 2 a.m. And you can see it's a cute little raccoon family that makes an appearance here at the bird feeders. You can see that something's going on day and night around here. Let's take a look. Right now we have a single deer and a single raccoon that is in front of the deer there, and neither of them seems to care about the other. Both of them are looking for seeds that the birds have spilled on the ground. It's common to have deer and raccoons show up here at night. So now we see the raccoon looking into the forest and disappearing into the forest. These infrared night lights really allow us to see fairly well. The animals are completely unaware of the light. It's not illuminating anything for them. It's not bothering their eyes or anything. They're completely unaware of it. So here comes the raccoon again. And this time she's bringing her little family of 4 little kits. And aren't they just about the cutest things you've seen? Tiny little kits coming to eat with mama. They stay very close to her. And mama senses something coming in the distance. So, and the kits hear it too, whatever it is. The deer is not so frightened, but the kits want to scurry back to the forest. So mom follows her kits. She takes a look and off she goes back to the forest. And what do we have here that's going to be coming to the feeder? It's not uncommon to see foxes as well as skunks. And oh, here comes another deer. Now, I find this very interesting because the raccoon showed no real interest in the first deer, but seems to show interest in the second deer. And the little kits are all waiting at the edge of the forest there, not knowing whether to go out back in the open or to continue into the forest. Here comes the second deer. So they're being brave. They come back. And something scares the first deer off. And suddenly the 2 deer are playing catch, and that's enough to scare the raccoon family back into the forest. Here comes the deer back, very curious about what happened to the raccoons. I find these interspecies interactions to be very interesting. I would not have expected the raccoon to respond to the deer so much, because it clearly tolerated the deer before. Yes, the lady, that is correct. No banding this week. It'll be next week. It's like herding cats to get the banding group together. We need the lift, we need the scientists, we need the bands. And I think part of the problem was that this year's bands had not yet arrived. So it's all a matter of getting everything together at the same time. And of course, this time we want to have all of our equipment to take it back up to the pole. So there's a lot of moving parts. Here comes the raccoon family again. I think those little kits are just so cute. And the deer takes off for whatever reason. So now the raccoon family have the pile of seeds to themselves. It's too bad nobody was watching who had camera control at the time. But I can assure you, I'm not up at 2 in the morning waiting for the raccoon families to show up. We'll need to get some overseas members in Japan or something that would be watching for their daytime or nighttime. Boy, they all like to stick close to mama, don't they? Curious little creatures. They're doing more exploring than eating for sure. One of our apartments here has a deck that hangs out over the riparian forest, and there's a tree there that is often home to both raccoons and pileated woodpeckers. So whoever is in that apartment ends up with some very interesting neighbors. Well, Mrs. Raccoon is like mothers everywhere, having to deal with all her children fussing around while she's doing her work. This raccoon undoubtedly has a den somewhere in a cavity of a cottonwood tree. That's a very common place for them to set up housekeeping. And we have a lot of cottonwood trees. So they are exiting in the opposite direction in which they came, which is kind of interesting. One wonders where they're going off to. So that's all I have today. And if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to call it a day. Lots happening here. We have another wedding coming up this weekend. It's our third wedding in a row, and then it's going to be a couple months before we have another one in September. And my hope is that the chick banding will occur on July 8th, which is a Saturday. And I say hope because I haven't had confirmation from all the various parties yet. It's herding cats around here sometimes, particularly with scientists, and I understand it because they're responding to a lot of different things in the field at the same time. So I'm not complaining, I'm just explaining. I don't see any other chats, so with that, I'm going to say goodbye and thank you all for having joined me this afternoon. I'm going to sign off, and if you want to refresh the ranch broadcast in about 2 minutes, you'll be back to the ranch web camera. And with that, I'll say goodbye. I'm going to be gone until next Thursday. Next Thursday, we will have a broadcast, and I'll show some previous years versions of banding, and we'll talk about why banding is important and how it's done next Thursday at 1 o'clock. So join us then. Thank you all for coming today, and you guys have a great 4th of July. I'm headed to the West Coast to see both of my sons on the Oregon coast. My oldest son reserved an Airbnb along a beach where there are supposedly a number of ospreys nests. So I'm going to go and see some other ospreys nests. I'm really excited to be with my family to do that. So thank you all for joining me, and we'll see you after the 4th. Take care. Happy 4th.